Susan Wojcicki, the former boss of YouTube and one of Google's earliest employees, has died aged 56. Google's chief executive Sundar Pichai announced that Miss Wojcicki had passed away after 2 years of living with lung cancer. Mr. Pichai, who is also the boss of Google's parent company Alphabet, said on Twitter he was unbelievably saddened, and Ms. Wojcicki was as core to the history of Google as anyone. Once described as the most important Googler you've never heard of, Ms. Wojcicki was present at the company's beginnings when, in 1998, she rented out her Menlo Park garage to the search engine firm's founders, Sergey Brin and Larry Page. She was later persuaded to leave her job at chip giant Intel to join Google, becoming the firm's 16th employee. Ms. Wojcicki would go on to lead YouTube, the online video sharing company owned by Google, for 9 years until 2023, when she stepped down to focus on my family, health, and personal projects I'm passionate about. Ms. Wojcicki was one of relatively few women to hold a senior role in the technology industry. She wanted to encourage more girls to go into the field, telling the BBC's NewsHour in 2013 that the future was going to be increasingly digitally influenced. But then I see there are very few women in the industry, she said. Overall, the tech industry has, on average, probably about 20% women. And I also look at the pipeline of girls coming out of technical degrees, and it is very small. While Ms. Wojcicki rose to become the boss of YouTube, her tenure was not without controversy. The platform faced criticism over its handling of online disinformation, including during the COVID pandemic. In 2022, a number of fact-checking organizations wrote to her accusing YouTube of being one of the major conduits of online disinformation and misinformation worldwide. Ms. Wojcicki stepped down a year later to focus on her personal life and health. Announcing her death with profound sadness, her husband Dennis Troper said, "My beloved wife of 26 years and mother to our 5 children left us today after 2 years of living with non-small cell lung cancer." Subscribe for more updates. San Francisco's former mayor Willie Brown has dismissed as fiction Donald Trump's story that they once endured a scary helicopter trip together. The former president said on Thursday that he and Mr. Brown had gone down in a helicopter together, and Mr. Brown had been a little concerned. "We thought maybe this was the end," Trump said. "We were in a helicopter, and there was an emergency landing. This was not a pleasant landing." Trump later insisted the story was true in a call to the New York Times, saying he was probably going to sue without elaborating. Mr. Brown, 90, told US media he had never shared a helicopter with Trump, adding, "I don't think I'd want to ride on the same helicopter with him." Trump, 78, appeared to be confusing Mr. Brown with Jerry Brown, California's former governor, with whom he shared a helicopter ride in 2018 to visit the aftermath of the Paradise wildfires. Gavin Newsom, the current state governor, was also on the flight. Both men told US media there had been no emergency landing or danger. "I call complete BS," Mr. Newsom told the New York Times. Trump told his story in response to a question about Willie Brown's relationship with Kamala Harris, 59, in the mid-1990s, while she was a California prosecutor. Trump was asked whether he thought the relationship had played a role in Ms. Harris's career journey. "Well, I know Willie Brown very well," Trump said, before speaking of the flight and claiming the former mayor had told him terrible things about Ms. Harris. "He had a big part in what happened with Kamala," Trump said. The former mayor also denied this. "That's so far-fetched, it's unbelievable," he told local TV station K-Ron. "I could not envision thinking of Kamala Harris in any negative way. She's a good friend a long time ago, absolutely beautiful woman, smart as all hell, very successful, electorally speaking. He was doing what Donald does best, his creative fiction." A spokesperson for Jerry Brown also told U.S. media that the former governor had not discussed Ms. Harris on the helicopter flight in 2018. Trump's remarks at an hour-long news conference at his Mar-a-Lago estate come as a recent national poll shows Ms. Harris is beating him among likely voters. The two have visited a number of battleground states this week alongside their vice presidential candidates to speak to voters. Subscribe to our channel for more updates. A plane has crashed in the Brazilian state of São Paulo, killing all 61 people on board. The twin-engine turboprop was flying from Cascavel in the southern state of Paraná to Guarulhos Airport in São Paulo City when it came down in the town of Vinhedo, Voipass Airline says. Footage circulating on social media shows a plane descending vertically, spiraling as it falls. The ATR 72-500 was carrying 57 passengers and 4 crew. Local authorities say there were no survivors. Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, expressed solidarity with the families and friends of the victims. São Paulo's state governor, Tarcísio Gomes de Freitas, declared 3 days of mourning. The authorities said the flight recorders had been retrieved. ATR, the French-Italian plane maker, said it would cooperate with the investigation. The plane landed in a residential area, but no one on the ground was injured. Officials say only one home in a local condominium complex was damaged. Video showed a large area on fire and smoking wreckage in an area full of houses. Police and fire services are at the scene. According to tracking website Flight Radar 24, the plane left Cascavel at 11:56 local time, 14:56 GMT. The last signal received from the aircraft was about an hour and a half later. Brazil's Civil Aviation Agency said the plane, which was built in 2010, had been in good operating condition, with valid registration and airworthiness certificates. The 4 crew members on board at the time of the accident were all duly licensed and had valid qualifications, it added. The Uopecan Cancer Hospital in Cascavel told BBC Brazil that 2 of its trainee doctors were among the passengers who died. The moment the passenger plane crashed was witnessed by local residents. When I heard the sound of the plane falling, I looked out my window at home and saw the moment it crashed, Felipe Magalhães told Reuters news agency, adding that the sight had left him terrified. Another resident, Natalie Sicari, told CNN Brazil she had been having lunch when she heard a very loud noise very close by, describing it like the sound of a drone, but much louder. I went out on the balcony and saw the plane spinning. Within seconds, I realized that it was not a normal movement for a plane. It is Brazil's worst plane crash since 2007, when a TAM Express plane crashed and burst into flames at São Paulo's Congonhas Airport, killing 199 people. President Lula paid tribute to the victims at an event where he was speaking. I have to be the bearer of very bad news, and I would like everyone to stand up so that we can have a minute of silence, he told his audience. He posted on social media that news of the crash was very sad. All my solidarity to the families and friends of the victims, he said. The nearby town of Valinhos sent 20 emergency personnel to the crash site as part of a joint operation, local authorities said. 20 men were mobilized, including 3 vehicles from the Valinhos Municipal Civil Guard and 1 vehicle from the Civil Defense, Valinhos City Hall said in a statement. ATR said in a statement that it had been informed of an accident involving an ATR 72-500. Our first thoughts are with all the individuals affected by this event, it said. The ATR specialists are fully engaged to support both the investigation and the customer. I went to the balcony and saw the plane spinning. Eyewitnesses have described seeing the moment a passenger plane crashed in the Brazilian state of São Paulo, killing all 61 people on board. Felipe Magalhães told Reuters news agency. When I heard the sound of the plane falling, I looked out my window at home and saw the moment it crashed, Felipe Magalhães told Reuters news agency. He ran out of his house in the town of Vinhedo to see where the plane had fallen. Terrified and not knowing what to do, I jumped over the wall, he said. Natalie Shikari lives near to where the plane crashed and said she was having lunch when she heard a very loud noise very close by. She described it as being similar to the sound of a drone, but much louder. I went out on the balcony and saw the plane spinning, Ms. Kikari told CNN Brazil. Within seconds, I realized that it was not a normal movement for a plane. The moment of impact was terrifying, she said. She was not hurt despite having to evacuate her house, which was filled with a huge plume of black smoke after the crash. Another witness called Pietro told Reuters he had seen a lot of people breaking into a condominium to make videos. What I saw was the wreckage of the plane. All that was left was the cabin, he said. At Cascavel Airport in the southern state of Paraná, where the plane had taken off bound for São Paulo City, a handful of passengers who missed the Vopass flight spoke of their feelings. Man, it's such an overwhelming feeling. Adriano Assis said that when he had arrived at the airport, there was a lack of information on takeoff and nobody was at the counter to answer questions. When someone did arrive, they told him he could not board yet, he said. I even argued with him, but he ended up saving my life, Mr. Assis told a local newspaper, as reported by Brazilian news agency Globo. Another passenger, Jose Felipe, was initially going to book on to a LATAM flight, but instead went to try and board the Vopass plane. We thought we were going to go through LATAM, but LATAM was closed, Mr. Felipe told Reuters. I arrived early, waited, and nothing. When it was 11:00, I came to look for information here, he went on. Then they told me, you're not getting on this plane anymore because you're past the boarding time limit. So I fought. I even pushed a little bit. I told him, let me get on. I have to leave on this plane. And he said, no, I can rebook your ticket. Man, it's such an overwhelming feeling. I'm here shaking. My legs are here. Only God and I were aware of this moment. Subscribe to our channel for more updates. All bodies have been recovered from the site of a plane crash in the Brazilian state of São Paulo, which killed everyone on board, the authorities have confirmed. Teams had been working to find and identify victims of the disaster after a twin-engine turboprop operated by airline Vopass came down in the town of Vinhedo. The number of casualties was revised upwards on Saturday to 62. Vopass said earlier that the ATR 72500 was carrying 57 passengers and 4 crew between Cascavel in the southern state of Paraná to Guarulhos Airport in São Paulo City. But it later confirmed there was another unaccounted-for passenger on the flight. Footage circulating on social media showed a plane descending vertically, spiraling as it fell. The aircraft crashed in a residential area, but no one on the ground was injured. Officials said only one home in a local condominium complex was damaged. The state of São Paulo said it concluded its operation to remove the victims' bodies from the site at 18:30 local time, 22:30 BST, on Saturday. It added that the bodies, 34 males and 28 females, were being moved to a police morgue in the city of São Paulo, where they will be identified and released to the families. 2 of the victims, the captain and first officer, have already been identified, the state confirmed. It added that family members will be staying in a hotel in the city to help with identifying the victims. 38 families have arrived so far. Earlier, Capt. Macon Christo, a spokesman for the fire department, said teams were relying on a number of factors to help identify passengers. These include documents and the position of bodies in relation to seating, as well as mobile phones recovered from some of the victims. The plane crash is Brazil's worst since 2007, when a TAM express plane crashed and burst into flames at São Paulo's Congonhas Airport, killing 199 people. At this stage, it is not known what caused the ATR 72-500 to crash. Authorities said the flight recorders had been retrieved. ATR, the French-Italian plane maker, said it would cooperate with the investigation. According to the tracking website Flight Radar 24, Flight 29283 had taken off from Cascavel at 11:56 local time, 14:56 GMT on Friday, and was due to arrive at 13:40. The last signal received from the aircraft was about 20 minutes before it was scheduled to land. Brazil's Civil Aviation Agency said the plane, which was built in 2010, had been in good operating condition with valid registration and airworthiness certificates. The 4 crew members on board at the time of the accident were all duly licensed and had valid qualifications, it added. The Uapecan Cancer Hospital in Cascavel told BBC Brazil that 2 of its trainee doctors were among the passengers who died. The moment the passenger plane crashed was witnessed by local residents, while others described damage to their homes. Luis Augusto de Oliveira told Reuters that he, his wife and their maid were at home when, suddenly we saw the aircraft exploding in the backyard of my house. He said, "At the time of the collision, we thought it was a helicopter breaking down due to the noise." He added that everyone in the house was unharmed, and while there was some damage, it was as minimal as possible. It was material goods. "I just have to thank God for the way the aircraft crashed." Another resident, Natalie Sicari, told CNN Brazil she had been having lunch when she heard a very loud noise very close by, describing it like the sound of a drone, but much louder. "I went out on the balcony and saw the plane spinning. Within seconds, I realized that it was not a normal movement for a plane." Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, expressed solidarity with the families and friends of the victims at an event where he was speaking. "I have to be the bearer of very bad news, and I would like everyone to stand up so that we can have a minute of silence," he told his audience. He posted on social media that news of the crash was very sad. "All my solidarity to the families and friends of the victims," he said. São Paulo's state governor, Tarcísio Gomes de Freitas, has declared 3 days of mourning. Subscribe to our channel for more updates. Celine Dion's team has criticized former U.S. President Donald Trump for the unauthorized use of a clip of one of her hits at a presidential campaign event. The song My Heart Will Go On, which featured in a 1997 film about the doomed ship Titanic, was played to supporters before Trump appeared on stage at a rally in Bozeman, Montana on Friday. In a statement released on X, Dion's team said she did not endorse the use of the song, adding, "And really, that song." Artists and bands, including Neil Young, Queen and the Rolling Stones, have previously complained about Mr. Trump using their songs at campaign rallies. The statement said, "Today, Celine Dion's management team and her record label, Sony Music Entertainment Canada Inc., became aware of the unauthorized usage of the video, recording, musical performance, and likeness of Celine Dion singing My Heart Will Go On at a Donald Trump to J.D. Vance campaign rally in Montana. In no way is this use authorized, and Celine Dion does not endorse this or any similar use." And really, that song? The Trump campaign has not responded to the statement. My Heart Will Go On is one of 5-time Grammy winner Dion's best-known songs. The Oscar-winning ballad was on the soundtrack of the 1997 blockbuster Titanic, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet as 2 lovers who meet on the doomed ship's maiden voyage in 1912. Dion made a triumphant return to live singing last month at the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics. It was her first performance since revealing she had been diagnosed with stiff person syndrome, SPS, in 2022. SPS is a rare neurological disorder that causes muscles to spasm and can be debilitating. The singer discussed her struggles with SPS in a film called I Am, Celine Dion, which Amazon Prime Video said last month had become its most successful documentary ever. The Canadian artist Neil Young has also previously objected to Trump using his songs. And in 2020, the Rolling Stones threatened him with legal action after the song You Can't Always Get What You Want was played at a political rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne sent a notice to Trump banning him from using Black Sabbath music in campaign videos in 2019. The Republican Party's presidential candidate is not the only politician to receive criticism from artists over the use of songs during campaign rallies. Last year, rapper Eminem asked aspiring Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy to stop using his songs. Bruce Springsteen castigated President Reagan for planning to use Born in the USA for his 1984 election campaign. Fatboy Slim furiously denounced the UK Labour Party for using his hit Right Here, Right Now at their 2004 conference, the year after the Iraq War. Legally, US politicians do not always need direct permission from artists. Their campaigns can buy licensing packages from music rights organizations, giving them legal access to more than 20 million songs. However, artists have the right to remove their music from that list. Subscribe to our channel for more updates. The US has denied a bid to allow MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy or Molly, to be used in the treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The US Food and Drug Administration, FDA, was examining the psychedelic drug made by Lykos Therapeutics to treat the mental health disorder in combination with talk therapy. The drug maker said the agency denied approving the medication over concerns about limited clinical data and whether psychotherapy contributes to treatment benefit and if it is even necessary. It said the agency requested further study. The FDA said the lack of data prevented it from concluding that this drug is safe and effective for the proposed indication. The FDA is responsible for ensuring drugs are both safe and effective, the agency told the BBC in a statement on Friday. In order to approve a drug, we must determine that the research and data submitted by the sponsor show that the drug is safe and effective for the intended use. Lykos Therapeutics said it would continue working with the FDA, but said additional research could take years to complete. It acknowledged using hallucinogenics to treat PTSD is a novel idea, but expressed frustration over the setback. The FDA request for another study is deeply disappointing, not just for all those who dedicated their lives to this pioneering effort, but principally for the millions of Americans with PTSD, along with their loved ones, who have not seen any new treatment options in over 2 decades. Amy Emerson, the chief executive officer of Lykos Therapeutics, said in a statement, "This is the first time the agency has considered a psychedelic for medical use. The drug is currently listed as Schedule Y under the Controlled Substances Act, as are heroin and cannabis. That classification is defined as drugs with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. MDMA has been touted as having therapeutic benefits for people suffering from some mental health disorders. But advisors for the FDA had expressed doubt. In June, an expert panel at the agency voted 10-1 against the overall benefits of the party drug when used to treat PTSD. 9 of the 11 advisors said the available data did not show the effectiveness of the drug in patients. One Lykos Therapeutics trial found 71% from the treatment group no longer met PTSD criteria, compared to 48% from a group taking a placebo. But FDA panelists voiced numerous concerns with the data. Issues included that the treatment may not offer long-lasting benefits, concerns about the ways the studies were designed, and the potential risk for heart problems, injury, and abuse. The FDA was not required to follow the committee's vote, but the agency often follows the panel's feedback, which it did in this case. Last year, Australia's traditionally conservative medicines regulator approved the use of drugs, including MDMA, to assist therapy sessions. Subscribe for more updates. They're weird. With that simple diss, as well as an overall more streamlined message, Vice President Kamala Harris's presidential campaign has shifted the conversation away from the weaknesses of her boss, President Joe Biden, and shone a spotlight on her opponent, Donald Trump. The change of tone was on full display at rallies this week, where she appeared with her new vice presidential pick, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. With Beyoncé's Freedom as their soundtrack, the pair made the case that they were out to protect American freedoms, while their weird Republican opponents, Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance, threatened to take them away. "We're not going back," Ms. Harris told an enthusiastic crowd in Philadelphia, leading a chorus of what has become the campaign's de facto slogan. It is a stripped-back version of Mr. Biden's 2020 message that Trump is a threat to democracy, that casts the former president as out of touch with American life. Even the vice president's press releases, sent from a campaign that once served Mr. Biden, have reflected the tone shift from deeply serious to something more light touch. Just 5 days after Mr. Biden stepped aside, a Harris spokesperson quipped that a Trump speech made him sound like someone you wouldn't want to sit near at a restaurant. Campaign strategists say this new messaging appears to be cutting through with Democrat-leaning voters because it makes voting for Ms. Harris sound more like a common-sense choice and less like a civic chore. But it is too early to tell if this fresh goodwill for a vice president who, until recently, struggled to grab the attention of American voters will last until November's election day. California Lieutenant Gov. Eleni Kounalakis, a Democrat who considers the vice president a close friend, said the campaign's fresh rhetoric reflects Ms. Harris's great sense of humor and her ability to be a good communicator on a very basic level. The fact is, these things are proving to be her strengths, and her joyfulness is breaking through the dark, menacing undertones of Donald Trump and his running mate. Meanwhile, Trump, who has long been known as an effective mudslinger and energetic campaigner since he entered politics during the 2016 presidential campaign, has struggled to punch back, especially against the weird framing. "They're the weird ones. Nobody's ever called me weird. I'm a lot of things, but weird I'm not," Trump said last week in an interview with conservative radio host Clay Travis. A honeymoon of free press. Ms. Harris, who once trailed Trump, is now on the front foot, polls suggest. A recent YouGov poll conducted on 6th of August said she would win the popular vote, with 45% of respondents saying they would vote for her in November, compared to 43% for Trump. That is a reversal of fortunes. A similar poll by YouGov, conducted almost 3 weeks ago, showed her losing by 3 points. David Polyanksi, who served as deputy campaign manager for Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis's 2024 presidential campaign, said that this shift could be because Ms. Harris was beating Trump at his own game. Since he first ran for president, Trump has benefited from being the main political story in the country, enjoying what political insiders like to call earned media or free press. But it is Ms. Harris's dramatic swing to the top of the Democratic ticket just weeks before the Democratic National Convention that has dominated headlines and airwaves in recent weeks. And she has done it without sitting down for a major media interview. To upstage the former president, who only recently faced an assassination attempt, is no small feat, said Mr. Polyanski. "It's really pretty remarkable," he said. Her campaign appears further buoyed by picking Mr. Walz as her running mate. It is probably too early to see what effect his pick will have on polling, but political analysts who designated key swing states, such as Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, as leaning Republican have since declared them toss-ups. It was, in fact, Mr. Walz who was the first to use the weird label when making media appearances last month in support of Ms. Harris's fledgling candidacy. He was quick to use it again at that Philadelphia rally with Ms. Harris when speaking of their Republican opponents. "These guys are creepy, and yes, just weird as hell." Mr. Walz's folksy ways seemed to resonate with several voters who spoke to the BBC. They said they liked the Minnesota governor because he was plain-spoken. Between drags of a cigarette, Tyler Engel, an independent Ohio voter on vacation in St. Augustine, Florida, said that Mr. Walz seems like a normal guy, a family man. And if there is one thing that we are starved for in this country, it's normal people, Mr. Engel added. Another voter, John Patterson of Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, said he found Mr. Walz to be a very genuine person. "What you see is what you get with him," he added. Is weird working with voters? Some political consultants marveled at the weird label's effectiveness. Many said that it broke through because it felt authentic, was not an audience-tested catchphrase or cliché, and it came about fast and organically. Calling Trump and J.D. Vance weird effectively repackaged President Biden's threat to democracy theme in a very understandable, almost light-hearted way that was maybe less severe and more colloquial, said Brian Brokaw, who worked on several of Ms. Harris's campaigns and ran a super PAC that supported her presidential campaign in 2020. He said the term immediately helped to recast the race from a referendum on Mr. Biden's 4 years in office to a question of, do we really want to go back to what we were doing during the Trump era? Republican pollster Frank Luntz was more skeptical. On BBC Newsnight on Tuesday, he declared Ms. Harris the new front-runner, noting she had captured fresh momentum. But he dismissed the weird label as weird in itself, saying it didn't resonate with voters. The catchphrase did seem to land with several undecided voters interviewed by the BBC. Jacob Fisher, an independent voter from Atlanta, said he thought calling Trump and Mr. Vance weird was appropriate and only mildly insulting in an age of political name-calling. "I think it's fair," Mr. Fisher said. "You can't say that it's very harsh because you have the other guy talking about how his opponents are vermin. So, weird? I don't know, but you can't really complain if you're Donald Trump." Still, voters who said they were backing Trump were unimpressed with the campaign's recent messaging. Frank and Teresa Walker of Illinois shared the view that the U.S. was going to hell under the Biden-Harris administration. And Jem Lowry, a Trump voter in Florida, said she did not like Harris's pick for vice president or the weird label they have used when discussing Trump, Mr. Vance, and the Republican platform. "I think the Democrats are the weird ones," Lowry told the BBC. "So no, I don't think that's right to call Republicans weird." A looming election. Ms. Harris's brat summer will not last forever. While the pick of Mr. Walz and the upcoming Democratic National Convention will be certain to maintain Ms. Harris's media dominance, experts agree that the campaign will have to change gears soon. Mr. Brokaw, a longtime advisor to Ms. Harris, said that her campaign will need to work to bottle the enthusiasm it has enjoyed since the vice president became the Democratic nominee. The peak of the honeymoon period is the convention, and then it's going to be a grind for 2 months probably with some debates, Mr. Brokaw said. "This is an exciting period of time, but at a certain point it's going to come back to reality, and then it's go time. If we're still talking about Trump and Vance being weird in October, I think I'd be surprised," he added. David Polyanksi, the Republican strategist, said the label works well from a 60,000-foot view, but he believed a message on the economy and immigration would ultimately sway voters in November. So for Trump, it's key he doesn't take the bait. He focuses on his message, and he reminds folks of his record and the administration's failures on both of those issues. Share your feedback in comments. Subscribe to our channel. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has condemned the loss of civilian life in an Israeli airstrike against a school building in Gaza on Saturday. More than 70 people were killed at the building, which sheltered displaced Palestinians, the director of a hospital has told the BBC. Ms. Harris said far too many civilians had been killed yet again and reiterated calls for a hostage deal and a ceasefire, echoing comments made by the White House. An Israeli military spokesman said Al-Tabarin School served as an active Hamas Islamic Jihad military facility, which Hamas denies. Speaking at a campaign event in Phoenix, Arizona, Ms. Harris said Israel had a right to go after Hamas, but also has an important responsibility to avoid civilian casualties. The Democratic Party's presidential candidate also reiterated calls for a ceasefire and a hostage deal. Saturday's airstrike has been criticized by Western and regional powers, with Egypt saying it showed Israel had no desire to reach a ceasefire or end the Gaza war. Fadl Naim, head of Al Ahli Hospital, where many of the casualties were taken, said around 70 victims had been identified so far, with the remains of many others so badly disfigured that identification was difficult. Israel's military said it had precisely struck Hamas terrorists operating within a Hamas command and control center embedded in the Al Tabain school. A statement by the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, and the Israeli Security Agency said at least 19 Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists were eliminated in the attack. IDF spokesman Rear Adm Daniel Hagari said, various intelligence indications suggest a high probability that the commander of Islamic Jihad's Central Camps Brigade, Ashraf Judah, was at the Tabain school when it was struck. He said it is not yet clear whether the commander was killed in the attack. Earlier estimates of the number of dead were also in the dozens, with the Hamas-run Health Ministry's ambulance service saying more than 60 had been killed, according to AP. The Civil Defense Agency put the number at more than 90. The BBC cannot independently verify figures from either side. The Israeli spokesman said the casualty figures released by Hamas officials do not align with the information held by the IDF, the precise munitions used, and the accuracy of the strike. Hamas described the attack as a horrific crime and a dangerous escalation in Israel's war of extermination against the Palestinian people. U.S. National Security Council spokesman Sean Savett said Hamas had been using schools as locations to gather and operate out of. But we have also said repeatedly and consistently that Israel must take measures to minimize civilian harm, he added. Israel has attacked several such shelters in Gaza in the past few weeks. According to the United Nations, 477 out of 564 school buildings in Gaza have been directly hit or damaged as of 6 July, with more than a dozen targeted since. Al Tabain school housed more 1,000 people, having recently received dozens of displaced people from the town of Beit Hanun, after the Israeli army ordered them to leave their homes. The building also served as a mosque, and the Israeli strike hit during dawn prayers, witnesses said. Jafar Taha, a student who lives near the school, told the BBC the sound of the bombing was followed by screaming and noise. "Save us! Save us!" they were screaming, he said. The scene was horrific. There were body parts everywhere and blood covering the walls. Salim Owais, spokesman for the UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, told the BBC the attack was really outrageous. All those schools are really packed with civilians, children, mothers and families who are taking refuge in any empty space, whether it's a school or it's a mosque, whatever it is, even in hospital yards. This strike has again drawn graphic attention to a controversial dynamic of the Gaza war. Israel claims that Hamas is using civilian infrastructure to plan and carry out attacks, and that is why it has been targeting hospitals and schools, sites protected under international law. Hamas has consistently denied the accusations. Hamas-led gunmen killed about 1,200 people in an attack on Israel on 7 October, taking 251 others back to Gaza as hostages. That attack triggered a massive Israeli military offensive against Gaza and the current war. More than 39,790 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli campaign, according to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry. Subscribe to our channel for